I'm Carla Reeves, and this is Differently, a podcast where we explore the ins and outs of what becomes possible when we're willing to think, do, and show up differently to the moments of our everyday lives. So I have a really special guest today. I had to take a big breath, and you can too. I'm going to introduce you today to the human that I have spent the most time with in my entire life. He is the father of our children. He has taught me more about life and love and living than anybody on this planet. I get to share everyday life with him. He's made me more uncomfortable than anybody I ever met in the best way possible. And he's my husband. He's Quinton. I'm so excited for you to get to spend some time with him. We don't know exactly where this conversation is going to go, but we're pretty excited to have it. So welcome.
No, I'm so glad. Thank you for that. I love you.
So when I was thinking about this month and the podcast, it's the month of love and Valentine's Day and all of that, but that's not why we're doing this. Our anniversary is actually in February, and this year we'll be married 20 years. And we've kind of rebelled against Valentine's Day always from the beginning, because we really believe that it's not about celebrating your relationship just one day of the year, but really learning to do that all the time. And so happy anniversary, babe.
Happy anniversary.
So where should we start?
Well, maybe we should explain a little bit about not celebrating Valentine's Day. I mean, that's like different. I tell people that we don't celebrate Valentine's Day. And they look at me sometimes like I'm crazy, but we kind of celebrate Valentine's Day every day. And it's on purpose.
Yeah. So when we got together, I had been married and divorced and was super afraid. I never imagined myself divorced, and I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to sustain a marriage. And so when we met, we from the get-go kind of started doing things different. Right, babe? What's your first memory of doing things different?
I think really when we started dating, I remember saying to you, like, I don't want to play the normal dating game. I was not up for a normal dating game. You know, wait 3 days. Do I not call? When's the proper time to call? Don't show too much interest, like whatever those conversations were. And we just said from the very beginning, we were going to start with kind of a honesty, like I'll call you if I want to call you. If you want to call me, call me. I'm not going to hide. If I want to call you every day, I'm going to call you every day. And so that just kind of started the beginning of really a truth or an honesty inside the relationship that allowed for us to create every day what was real.
Yeah. And so what we're going to share today, what we're ultimately going to get to today, it can sound like like we have something that's perfect. And I really want to just take that out right from the beginning that for me, I thrashed around so much when we got together. Um, and I have tried to change him. I've tried to make him behave the way I wanted him to behave. I've tried to make him dress the way I wanted him to dress. I have resisted so many things over the years. And did we say we were going to be married 20 years
Yeah, we did.
this year? Okay, good. So I've been all over the place in this marriage. There were times where I was half in and half out and didn't know if we would make it in the beginning. I came in with tons of insecurity, um, tons of jealousy, and I'm sure you had your stuff too, but I feel like I had the bulk of it. And he, if it weren't for your solidness and calm nature and ability to give me so much space to freak out, I don't know if we'd be here today. And I'm so grateful for that.
Me too. I know I have my stuff, but I really did know that you were the one for me from day one. And not that I didn't have those same type of feelings of wondering if we were going to make it or if this was really worth the effort sometimes. But it's proven to be 10 times worth the effort. You know, I think I just want to inspire people that there is something that is really great that is inside of the connection between two people. And I think it's lost in the world today. I think our society, it's all about what are we getting? I get this, you get that. And the scorecards are so deep and not fulfilling. And there's so much more available than the scorecard. And,
Yeah.
that's what I hope people can get, that there is a richness that's available. But it's not an easy road. But it's a purposeful road.
Well, that makes me think of like, even in all of my thrashing around, like even in the beginning when we met and I was kind of freaking out about it because something inside of me knew that there was something really special here. And that's what like kept me in always. And I knew in my heart that there was something better available. And like, when I looked around, I mean, and I shared in that last week was, how I was afraid that like this bliss monster, like we had so much magic when we got together. And I was so afraid that this monster was going to come in at some unknown date and just take that away. And I remember people, would kind of, it felt like curse us, like, oh, look how happy they are, but just wait. And it was listening and following that voice, whether it was God or something, my intuition, or I'm not sure what it was, but there was something always guiding that was deeper and stronger that kept me and I think us in the game to really design something different. Like what my thought in my head was like, what if we could create something different? And what if instead of like at one time I subscribed to the idea that you just fall in love and live happily ever after. And But then I started to think like, well, that doesn't work, and you need tools for sure. But what if it's our job to actually cultivate a space where we can fall in love again and again and again? And I think that's the journey we've been on. Yeah. And now we get to like look back at it, right?
Totally. I think we have, and I think the mental practice, I guess, is only word I can think of. From the very beginning, when we met, we had kind of both went through almost like a cleansing of our past, of looking that we can create fresh from the future to the future. And so we did kind of from the very beginning say to each other, how are we going to do these things differently? And one of the things was we talk all the time. And we always check in. We always find when something is amiss, we dissect it and pick it out and take the trash and
Boy,
throw it
do we
away.
ever.
Almost too much.
Can I just share like some of the funny things? Because I think you've really led the way of our communication. And it just makes me think of, well, one, I prayed for you on the toilet. Like I prayed that you would ask me out, and then literally walked in the room of the class we were in, and we were paired together, and it literally started in communication, right? Like we had the most amazing connection in that very first conversation. And then I think about when you proposed to me on the airplane, like for people listening, like this guy is crazy. Like he's seriously, when I said he's been making me uncomfortable since I met him, he really has, like in the most incredible way. But he proposed to me on an airplane. He didn't even know he was going to. Do you want to say anything about that?
Well, I love that story.
It's a great story.
We were just sitting on the plane flying to Indiana and bored in a packed full plane and kind of snuggled in the back and playing hangman to pass the time. And I just really was overwhelmed by you and you sitting next to me, and it just felt right. And I thought to myself, I'm going to write on here, will you marry me, in the little hangman game? And if you get it wrong and get hung, I'm not going to marry you. And you didn't miss a letter. And I just remember I could tell you figured out what it said, and we're kind of in shock, and off we went.
Off we went. So good. And then I like the other two memories are you like we were on a date at I think we were at a brewery, and like sitting across from each other at this like large like wooden table, and all of a sudden you were just like coming across the table, like this wide table, to give me a kiss. And it was so sweet, and like a little overwhelming at the time. And then the other memory I have about communication, and this was kind of the beginning, like of you teaching me what it meant to like be truthful and speak the truth and say what's so, no matter where you are. Because I kind of grew up that you had those conversations like in quiet places, maybe behind closed doors. And I remember we were on one of our first trips, and we were in the produce aisle of the grocery store, and we were like having some upset discussion, and you wanted to like solve it and work through it right next to the apples or something in the produce section. And I was freaking out. Like, who is this guy? This is not appropriate. But that's what we've learned to do, is talk it out. And that's been honestly like the most, I think, amazing key to what we have today, is just talking about every little thing and making sure nothing ever builds up, so that we
Yeah,
can
if you don't fix
fall in love again and again.
if you don't fix the little problem by the apples, it's going to be days before you get back on track. And like, I don't have that much time. I don't. let's get
Mhm.
through the upset so we can get back to being in love and having fun and enjoying life. Otherwise, you spend so much time in angst and upset and anxiety and yeah, like if you've got to really pay attention. I think that's one of the main keys is paying attention to the I don't want to call it energy, but I guess it is energy, but paying attention to where the upsets are, where does it all lie, and when it feels off, find out why it's off. Sometimes we think it's us, but it might just be work or the news or COVID or who knows what. But if you're not finding out where the upset is, then you're going to be there a while.
That's so true. I don't know when it was that we created sweeping, or like called it that, but that's what it is, right? Like just sweeping those little upsets. And it gave me so much freedom to start. Like you might make like just have a look on your face or say one sentence to me and I sends me into like an internal spin. And instead of spinning out, which I used to do, for a lot of years, I've just said to you, like, you just said this and it felt like this over here. Is that what you meant? And like 99% of the time, I'm so far off. But we can just clear it right there and then. And even if it is something we have to talk about, and then it's gone and it doesn't ruin our whole day or our whole week, which is what I did a lot in the past. And I see people do all over the place. And like you said, that we don't have a lot of time. Like, let's clear it quickly.
Yeah,
So
because
good.
when you're talking about sweeping, I always view it like like an electrician. You have your electrical wires and there's that electrical connection that's coming between us, and that's why we got married, and that's why we have the passion we have. But when you let all that dirt, like just on wiring, if you get too much dirt going, the electrical connection starts to short out. And so if you're not cleaning off the dirt, it's going to pile up so much that it's going to feel like way too much work to clean with 5 years down the road. And I think that's why people end up bailing, is it's way easier to start a new relationship than fixing the old one. I mean, we do it with everything in our society, our cars, our furniture, it's too much work to fix it, to just throw it out and buy a new one. And I think that's kind of sad.
Mhm. So let's talk about that for a minute because I think, people do see it as like a lot of work. Like it's a lot of work. And I mean, I guess if we look at what we do inside of our marriage, you could look at it like that. Like it's a lot of work. It doesn't feel like that. To me, it's more just a commitment that we've made. And when we do the work, like the rewards of that are what keep me showing up to do the work. You know?
I do.
Like what do you think about that?
What I don't feel like it's work either. It's intentional, or it's kind of like when you get into a rhythm, I guess going to the gym. Some people who never go to the gym, like going to the gym is a lot of work, like to get in shape. But then sometimes there's grooves where once you're in the groove and it's a part of what you do and a part of the way you live, then it's not work. It's just what you do. And so it's not hard. And I think that's maybe why people think it's hard, because it's the transition, I guess, that they've never been taught or never been had a foundation to work from, or a schematic to plan around in order to make it part of their daily life. Does that make sense?
Mm. I love that. Yeah. I mean, if you think about like people talk about like habits and routines and like all of that around every other facet of our life. But do you ever hear people talking about like their marriage habits or their marriage routines that really help their marriage stay fit and thriving? Like we don't talk about that. People don't talk about that. And it's so important. And I think what we've experienced is that when we do that, our marriage fuels every other part of our life and our day.
Absolutely. It should be the focal point because it makes everything else easier, I feel. Um,
It does. Because when we're off and then I try to go do my work or be with the kids or even spend time with friends or do anything, my half of my being is lost in thoughts about you and I and how we're off. And like I can't even be present or fully engaged in anything else I'm doing. And so keeping that connection strong and alive is such a priority.
I agree. I feel it on a daily basis.
What has been, I think of that quote that you and I saw. I don't know who said it or exactly where it was. I think it was in a book, but it was like your marriage isn't designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you holy. And for me, like I just have never forgotten that because I think for so many years I thought your marriage was supposed to make you happy. And I put tons of energy into trying to make you happy or trying to make marriage look just so because then I would be happy. And I that idea just really, really strikes me because I think it turns everything on its head. And I'd love to hear what that quote means to you.
Well, that to me, I make it in two parts: holy, HOLY, because there is a spiritualness in our connection of being married, and one I think that's missing in the world. But also holy, like whole and complete. Like we are two halves to the whole. When you said your half of your being is, off, it's because we are two halves to the whole. It is becoming one, and it is purposeful to be one. And I'm not sure people know how to do it. Nobody's ever taught how to do it, and I think it's sad that we need to teach our children how to do it, how to find that peace and that emotional resilience what it takes to make relationships whole and complete.
Well, and if you think back, like in this idea of holy or happy, um, if you look back at like the incredible growth, like where we've had incredible growth inside of our marriage, it's always come from places of friction or hardship or challenges and I think that's where, people like when you're thinking your marriage is supposed to make you happy, it can be easy to just want to opt out when things get hard. And I think that when things get hard, it's for me, it's like now, it's like my eyes get wider now when it gets hard. I get more curious because I know that there's like a purpose in whatever hardship is in front of us or whatever disagreement we're having. And if I can just hold on to like this bigger commitment of what we have and what we want for our marriage and kind of walk through whatever that obstacle or hardship is, it always teaches us something. It always brings us closer. Like there's something good always inside of it. And it can feel super uncomfortable.
Well, and I think the difference is we don't have happiness as the goal. Happiness is the result of what we do, but happiness is never the goal in the marriage. That's the way I view it. So that's kind of like a shift in focus, right? So maybe people are they're focused on trying to be happy or something to that effect. But when we have a struggle that is in the way, like it is so glaring that we've trained ourselves to have to acknowledge it and resolve it fairly quickly. And sometimes we don't resolve it, but sometimes we just acknowledge it and say, okay, we're not going to let this get in the way. We're going to set it to the side until we can resolve it. And some of those things took years to resolve. You know, years. So it wasn't like like, we have some upset with money or what have you. That didn't get resolved that moment, but that discussion was had. It was acknowledged that there's an upset, and we're going to set it to the side until we can figure out the right path to resolve it. But for me, the goal in clearing all that up is what it provides when the space is clean and clear from the sweeping, and what is available is, and I don't want to sound corny, but it is like a love and a connection and a purity that is there between us. And so that then gives you the happiness. Happiness is the residual result of it.
Yeah, it makes me think of like, I don't know, one thing I learned along the way with you is that like we had to fight the issues and not each other. And I remember like you talked about money, and I remember for years, like we would talk about money and it would just always end sort of in a downward spiral of unfulfillment. It was such an unfulfilling conversation. And I remember thinking in my mind one day that I was so tired of that conversation going that way. And I remember thinking, like, I just saw a hierarchy in my mind. And I realized that I was putting like finances and money, that conversation above the connection and well being of our marriage. And I just saw those pieces like flip, like the well being of the marriage went above the conversation about finances. And for me, that changed everything. And it it ripples all over the place, right? Like where we allow life and circumstances and what's happening or kids or whatever it is to rob our marriage and our connection, and making that a priority has rippled everywhere.
Absolutely. Once that is the focal point, then those conversations, whether it be about money or work or kids or school or anything, those conversations are way easier to have now, because the top piece is clean and clear, and there's an aspect of team and partnership and love that cascades down over those conversations. And so it just makes it easier to then resolve whatever issues come about.
So true. So let's talk about created marriage for a little bit, because I think this is something that we've been talking about a lot lately, and that's, I don't know, it just inspires me so much that we don't have to kind of fall into like what other people do or what's been done before or what we've witnessed, or like we literally like have the freedom to create in our marriage every single day. And maybe without realizing that we've been doing that like from the get-go, because I remember when the boys were babies, like we would create dates at like 9 o'clock at night, after they were asleep, just to make sure that we could take care of our relationship too. And over the years, we've had to create a lot of different things. And that idea just inspires me so much that you don't ever have to feel like we don't have to feel trapped. Like when things get stagnant or things get boring, or we feel like in a rut or just a little bit blah in our marriage, that we have options always. We have choices and we can use those and be creative with those to kind of reignite things. What is it to you?
Well, one of the things that I look at is when anything is kind of like in a rut, or I'm feeling, let's say, upset or angst or resentment or any of those types of feelings that come about in life, a lot of the times I just for myself look at it and say, does this help me create my marriage well? Like, are these thoughts or feelings helping me kind of live that clearness? And a lot of the times I recognize that it doesn't serve my higher goal. And so it allows me to, I don't want to say throw them out, but either communicate my upset or toss it out, that it's not worth it, that it's not worth uh, having a struggle or why would I want that? And some people hang on to those things so dearly and they suffer through because they just can't let go of maybe something their spouse said or did wrong, or, they left the cap off the toothpaste or whatever stupid thing it is that we go through in life.
I never do that.
But those little things that people
Oh, that's funny.
hang on to for so long.
I know, but so did you ever hang on to things like that? And
Oh,
like,
all
how did you learn to do that?
Well, I think it was I think I recognize that I, and this is just my own personality. And like I said, I'm going to sound corny right now, but I love being in love with you. It is fun. It's the most enjoyable thing in the world. So if it gets in the way of that, oh, it's not worth it. So I've really chosen to have that be one of my highest goals or values. And so if that's at the top priority of the things that I really enjoy, then I look at what are the things, who am I being in relationship to that? And it doesn't mean that I don't get upset and don't have resentments and sometimes feel like I'm getting slighted or whatever it is. But I either communicate what the upset is to resolve it so that it can be clear, or I recognize that it's my own selfishness or my own ego or my own uh, whatever that's getting in the way, and that helps me transform myself on a daily basis. That's what created
I love that.
that's a created marriage, because I'm creating who I'm being, what I'm doing every day in relationship to our marriage. And then I can go to work, I can talk to people, I can enjoy life through that prism.
That's so cool. You've really practiced that. You're really good at that.
Thanks.
You are. Um, so I want to talk about one more thing, and that's this idea that, you know, when you get married and you're engaged and all that magic and romance and bliss, I think there's like this idea out there, and I definitely believed in it, that like that was sort of the peak. And you can feel it out in the world and in the culture that's the peak, and then marriage kind of goes downhill and it just gets mediocre and it's okay, and you just see a lot of people resigned and sort of living in the midst of that circumstance, but kind of looking around and going, well, that's what everybody else is doing, so this must be normal. And i I think we believe that, like, that's just when you get married and you get engaged, that's just the beginning. And that there's an opportunity to grow and nurture and cultivate it so that it gets better and better and better over time. And that just makes me so happy and excited to share with people.
Well, me too. And that reminds me of the quote I read the other day, and it was that marriage is not a noun, it's a verb. And so people look
Mm,
at it as a noun, that it is something that is just there or that they did. It's not, it's a verb that is a continuation of a daily practice. And people don't recognize that it's a daily engagement, it's a daily experiment, it's a daily, you have to have marriage maintenance. And if you're not actively engaged in that marriage of joining yourselves spiritually, emotionally, physically, all three of those things, you're missing out. And if one piece of that puzzle is off, it's like a tripod. It's going to fall down at some point.
mm. Well, and it's, you made me think about like when you first meet, you're bringing your best self, you're bringing your best game, right? And I think it is about bringing your best self, but I don't want to paint the picture that, um, like we don't let our guards down and we don't relax and we don't have, like, we can't just be sad or be mad or be grouchy, like it's making space, I think, for all of that, but with an underlying consistent commitment to show up for each other and for ourselves.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I know that there are times where, I'll even say to you, like, I need an hour to unwind. I don't want to talk. I don't want to I just I need my own space. And like, that's okay to say, like, I need to go be a hermit in my cave for a little bit, you know? Um, but the difference is like saying what is so, like, this is what I need. This is what I request. This is what's going to serve me emotionally, physically right now. And it doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't mean anything about us. And if you're not communicating those things, then if I go in my cave, you might be feeling, oh, well, he's mad at me or he's upset or this or that. And it just, people let those things spiral out. So, yeah.
Well, and I think we can kind of wrap up, but um, what I'm excited about in our marriage is like just continuing to make this like the most amazing place to hang out, because we spend a lot of time together and here, especially now. And we get to make this like the most comfortable, cozy, amazing place to be. And I'm excited to just keep doing that.
Me too. For another 20 years, at least.
Yeah. So we're going to have to come back and dive into some other areas, but super excited to share this conversation. We have these conversations all the time, but we don't really share them out loud. So this is good.
It's good. Thanks, babe. I love you.
Any final thought?
That was it.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Differently. I hope it stirred your thinking, and I invite you to take one inspired action from something that stood out to you. If you want to hear more conversations like this, hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app. And please help us spread the word by sharing this podcast with people you know. Remember, new episodes drop weekly. See you next week.